Hi guys, this is Komal and welcome to my channel Urban Hobby Gardener. As part of the Garden Basics series, I'm going to talk to you today about how you can choose the right sized pot for your plants. And there are three considerations here. Number one, drainage. Number two, size of the pot. And number three, the material of the pot. Now I'm going to cover each of these in detail, so stay tuned. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and please do subscribe to my channel for more updates. Alright, let's get stuck into it. Number one, drainage. Now, regardless of whether you're going to pot your plant indoors or outdoors, make sure that your pot has drainage holes at the bottom of the pot. Now, this is actually very important because while plants like being moist, they don't like to be waterlogged. They hate having soggy feet. And that can actually cause root rot, which is irreversible and fatal for the plant. So make sure your pots have sufficient and enough holes at the bottom of your pot. Point number two is about the size of the pot. Okay, now as you can see, I've got a few different size pots here. And while it would seem relatively like simple math that if you have a bigger plant, you need a bigger pot, and if you have a smaller plant, you need a smaller pot. But what happens when you have an existing plant and you're thinking, okay, well, I need to repot it. How big a pot shall I get? Okay, now that decision is affected by, let's say, two broad factors. Okay, one is the plant itself, the nature of the plant itself. And in some way that also lends to the growth rate of the plant. Okay, so say for example, if you're going to put a mint plant, okay, in your pots, mint is a very vigorous grower. Okay, so and it grows horizontally more than it grows vertically. Okay, so you'd want a pot that is sufficiently wide so that you don't have to keep repotting it over and over again every few weeks. On the other hand, if you're looking at your indoor plants, okay, you are dealing with plants that have a much slower growth rate compared to their outdoor counterparts. All right, so in those instances, you can get away by just selecting a pot that is just marginally bigger than your existing pot, for example. As a good rule of thumb, I usually select pots that allow, say, about 2/3 empty space for my plants to grow, which means my plant takes up about 1/3 of the space within the pot. Now, as I said, of course, it also depends on the type of plant you're growing and whether you're growing it indoors or outdoors. So that rule of thumb may change based on that. So what happens if you happen to select the wrong sized pot for your plant? Well, it is not the end of the world, let me assure you that much. If you end up choosing a pot that is too small for your plant will become root bound, okay? If it does become root bound, all you need to do is just tease the root out and replant your pot. Alrighty, the only issue that would happen is, I guess, if you just keep your plant root bound for too long. That, coupled with a few other factors, may or may not be fatal for your plant. But if you address it straight away, then, as I said, not the end of the world. On the other hand, if you choose a pot that is way too big, what happens in that scenario? Well, one, it's going to cost you a lot more to fill it up with soil, okay, especially if you have purchased that soil. Second, all that excess soil also is the perfect breeding ground for weeds, so you're going to be weeding a lot more often. Third, and the more important one, I suppose, is the soil will start compacting in a much larger pot. So what I mean by a much larger pot is a larger pot where the plant is relatively small, okay? In those instances, the soil starts compacting and can potentially clog up your drainage holes. Now, again, if that happens, it's quite simple. You just aerate your soil out, you turn around a few times. Of course, don't damage the root of your plants. And again, that would kind of ease your problem out. Point number three is about choosing the right material for your planter. First up, let's talk about a clay or a terracotta pot. Now, most gardeners absolutely love these pots because they're breathable. And by breathable, I mean that they are porous. So they're absolutely excellent conductors of airflow, alrighty? They provide a lot more airflow to your plants than any other type of pots, but they also draw out a lot of moisture from your plants. So if you are supposing, if you have indoor plants and you're guilty of overwatering your plants, for example, then this would be a perfect choice. Some things to think about though with these kind of pots is they do tend to be quite heavy and quite fragile. So it's probably not a good idea if you reckon you might, just absentmindedly kick them around, or if you need to move them quite often. This pot, even though it's quite empty, is already, quite heavy. I can feel that weight just lifting it single-handedly. So when I put soil into it and then a plant into it, it is only going to get heavier. Now, your second choice is a ceramic planter. I personally find ceramic planters really attractive because of their nice glossy look. And if you like the idea of a terracotta pot and you're thinking, well, okay, I could just paint it up and make it look pretty. One word of advice: the minute you start painting your terracotta pots to, make it nice and pretty like this, it does mean that you're going to make your pots non-breathable because you'll end up sealing all those porous elements of that pot. Okay, but ceramic pots, they have their own place already. They're not as heavy as the terracotta pots. They, come in beautiful finishes and artwork. Okay, and they are good at retaining moisture for your plants because they don't absorb as much water from the soil. So if you have plants that ideally, like a higher level of moisture, okay, not being soggy feed, but just slightly higher levels of moisture, then these planters are perfect for those kind of plants. One thing, and I will go in closer to this pot and hopefully you'll be able to see it. You will see I have some hairline cracks in these pots. You'll see some up here as well. And this is actually quite normal for ceramic planters. Okay, they don't do very well to constant contraction and expansion. All right, so if you are going to put your ceramic pots outdoors, then don't be surprised if you end up with a few cracks the next time you look at it. Now, lastly, I'm going to talk to you about plastic pots. Now, of course, there are, many more variety of pots out there. So you'll have even, metal pots. I'm personally not a big fan of metal pots because I like to put my plant straight into its original pot as opposed to putting it into one pot, then putting it into a second pot and stuff like that. And metal is a good conductor of heat, so you wouldn't want to put your plants directly into a metal planter because that will just scorch your plants. All right, so the last material I'm going to talk about for the purposes of this video is plastic pots. Now, plastic pots, they're relatively cheap. They're lightweight, which means if I have, big plants that I need to move in and out, like say, for example, I'm growing a curry leaf plant at the moment, and because it's winters, I need to keep it indoors. When it's nice and warm, I'll have to take it outdoors. But even when it is cold, if a nice sunny patch comes along, I move it right into that sunny patch, all right? So things like, so for something like that, I want a potter which is relatively lightweight, okay? So plastic, or even ceramic for that matter, is a good choice when it comes to that. Now, just like with ceramic pots, plastic pots also retain a fair bit of moisture, which is good for plants that like, an extra little bit of moisture, okay? And there are some non-toxic paints available in the market which you could use to beautify up your plastic pots, and that won't really affect your plants either, provided they are non-toxic. Alrighty, so even if a little bit does happen to seep into your plants, then it's not going to kill your plant and all will still be well. All right, so there is, you can get a little bit creative with plastic pots as well, which is what I like about it. Well, that was it. Those are my 3 tips of choosing the perfect pot for your plant is, and I hope you found this useful. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching.